Well, hello. We want to welcome you to another episode of Coffee and Corona. We've got Caroline. Are you coffee or Corona today?
I have a coffee cup,
Ah,
but as we've talked about before, what's inside it?
appearances can be deceiving.
Yes. And
We were just,
are you coffee or Corona today?
I am neither because I was actually getting engrossed in a project and getting engrossed in Tosca, Tosca, the scene of the Te Deum by Puccini, and just some marvelous opera while I was diving into a project and uh, forgot to be prepared for this. I even forgot we were meeting. Well, I didn't forget we were meeting. I just lost track of time. So, but when it's for good music, epic music, it's worth it.
Absolutely.
Uh, I could say I'm Corona because I've got kind of a deserty background. You're obviously searching for the city of Atlantis.
I am. Yes, I am.
How's it going?
The search continues. No, I thought was a good background that relates to our topic today.
Okay, how so?
Well, do you want to tell us what the topic is?
Well, you could tell us what the topic is, but our topic is being quiet and the power of being quiet.
Yes. I was just thinking, as I was getting ready for this, that when you are underwater, it seems really, really quiet. That because unless you have some kind of diving, apparatus, you can't stay under there for very long. But if you just go underwater, hold your breath, it's really, really quiet.
This is true. The way you hear changes. Like you're not hearing through your ears, you're really hearing through your body and skeletal system. I would love to hear whale song, just because you're not going to hear that through your ears. You're going to hear that through your body, which I think would be a magical experience.
Yeah, and that's the only thing you could hear by being quiet, don't you think?
Probably. I've never really thought about what sounds are going on underwater. I'm sure there's lots.
Yeah.
But you have to listen in a different way or hear in a different way.
Have you ever tried to sing a song underwater?
Yeah, doesn't go very well.
Or get somebody's attention. If somebody's swimming over there, you're like, blah, 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 blah.
Well, it doesn't sound like Puccini, I'm sure.
I wonder what Puccini would sound like underwater.
I wonder what the whales would think of Puccini being sung underwater. I wonder if we could teach a whale to sing Puccini.
Huh. I think you could have a dolphin, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess we'll get some scientists and musicians working on it, ask them to do this,
I'm
maybe 50, 100 years in the future.
sure it's a high priority science project. It's dolphins.
Yeah,
sing Puccini.
Let's keep people from starving to death, and then we'll work on underwater opera.
Yes.
Let's see, underwater alternate mammal opera.
Yes, but we digress.
Hugely. I think we should be quiet now.
I think that's a great idea.
Well, what should we say about being quiet? Why is quiet a superpower, being quiet? This is very awkward.
It is awkward, isn't it? That was one of the things. We had a happiness hangout yesterday, and one of the things that we talked about was how awkward those pauses can be when the natural tendency is to fill the void with something, and it does make it awkward. I thought that we had a good conversation about that yesterday, and about the reasons why people have this need to just sort of talk to fill the space.
Well, let's talk about the need first, because I really I hadn't thought about it the way you had started the conversation, and I loved the way the conversation went that way, and I'd love to dive into the good parts of it. But I was curious why is the silence awkward when it's awkward? Because we also discussed that it's not always awkward. So why, when it's awkward, why is it awkward?
I think it goes to anticipation. Well, actually, so I think it's a couple things. One is anticipation. You're trying to, most of the time when we ask a question, we're seeking information or we're seeking validation, perhaps, about an idea or something that we're thinking. And when there's this long pause, we're not getting what we've anticipated. So it makes it awkward because all of a sudden we're thinking like, oh no, is this going to go? How is this going to go? All of a sudden we're in uncharted territory if people don't just, jump right in. The other thing, so that was the first thing. What was the second thing? Oh, I know. I wonder, sometimes I don't say things because I'm afraid to monopolize a conversation. So I will, so if there's a pause, especially if there's like 3 or 4 people, let's say there's 3 or 4 people talking in a group, and there's that pause. I'm pausing because I'm afraid that I'm talking too much. So I don't want to talk too much. So it feels awkward for me because I want to jump in, but I feel like I have to hold back. I'm one of those, like kids in the class that's always the participator, and I don't want to be the sole participator.
Yeah, there's kind of a selfish aspect to monopolizing a conversation. And a lot of times it depends on the dynamic of the people involved, because I think with the quiet comes the unknown. We don't know what people are thinking, especially if we don't know the people we're with all that well, or maybe even at all. And it gets quiet, then we don't know if it's a good quiet or a bad quiet. And the brain tends to fill silence with the worst. We imagine the worst. We even start to go off in the direction of, oh, it is what I think it is, which is the worst. And so, oh no, things are awful. I don't know, like you go on a date, say, and there's some silence. And I think that's one setting people think of as the most awkward, because you definitely don't know this person. You don't know what they're thinking. You don't know if they're okay with silence. And so you kind of want to fill the silence with something, anything, even if it's just idle prattle. And because you don't want it to be awkward, you don't want it to be the worst. You just try to avoid. Just like I'm doing now, I'm just kind of like I keep talking and talking and saying not much.
In the conversation.
Oh man, what do you think about that?
I think that you weren't just talking and talking and talking. That's another thing that's an interesting aspect of communication is, and this might just sound really, I don't know, pedantic or something or obvious, but sometimes you can talk and you think it feels like a really long time, but it actually really isn't that long. Whereas other times you feel like you haven't really even started discussing the subject, and then you look at who you're talking to and they're kind of, glazed. They're glazed over like you've gone on way too long. Have you ever had that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. When I find somebody who's willing to listen to me talk, I can go. And sometimes it's just because I needed an outlet.
Mm.
Actually, you've been one of the people who's been kind enough to listen to me go on and on. But again, it's like when you get that silence and it starts to feel awkward, I think the other thing is people feel insecure, like we take it personally. And I have a hard time understanding that very much because I love silence. I love pauses so that I can just think about, hey, what do I think about what we were just talking about? I don't have to be talking when I'm around other people. And it's kind of nice when you're around people who also don't have to talk. I don't know if are you similar at all in that respect?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I think somebody brought it up yesterday that you're in a car, you're on a trip, you're in a car ride, and if it's fun to get into a really awesome conversation, and it can make the time go by on the trip a lot, just it can just fly by. But also there's really something that can be very meditative about, and I think as you mentioned, it's an intimacy. It's a sharing of space where, when people aren't talking, but there are other ways. It allows yourself to open up to other ways of communicating, because you're both in that space together, and you're listening to the sounds around you. You're seeing the thing, you're seeing things, hearing things, smelling things, etc. And you're allowing yourselves and each other to feel it. And it can be a very intimate activity.
And I have observed that a lot of people are uncomfortable with that level of intimacy. It's like it's too intimate.
Mm-hmm.
And so they become kind of like a talking terrorist of making sure there is no intimacy by making sure there's no silence. And I I gravitate towards people who are confident in the silence and they can actually respect some quiet moments for the other person because it feels like they're respecting me. And I feel like I'm respecting them by giving them some quiet time. So maybe we should dive into the other ways that the silence can actually be a powerful thing because when you brought it up, you didn't say awkward silence. You said pregnant pause.
Uh-huh.
And that's different. That's very different to have a pregnant pause. And I think the pregnant pause is the one where it's like swelling and ready to burst because it maybe is getting uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But there's that anticipation you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved how the conversation went to like when you go to church or a religious meeting or a meditation circle.
Reverential silence. Yeah.
There's kind of this sacred
Mm-hmm.
space that's shared with each other. I love going to an empty chapel, like a cathedral, and just sitting in silence. I mean, it's profound, the silence. It's powerful. But when you're sharing it with others, it's even more powerful sometimes.
How do you feel when that is interrupted? Let's say you find yourself alone in an old church, and you're there and you're taking that moment, and then people that are just there to visit the church because it's historic and they want to see it too, but they don't necessarily find the power and the silence of it, or walking around and looking at the sculptures and the windows and so forth, and they're talking, and even if they're talking quietly, it's probably interrupting that silence, or is it?
Sometimes that depends on the circumstances, depends on my mood, because I've been in all of the above where, I was in a place where I didn't mind if there was some extra noise. Um, Also, times where the people were whispering, but they were actually being very disrespectful. And it's their disrespect that I was mostly perturbed by,
Mm-hmm.
more than like my quiet time being interrupted, because I can always go find another quiet corner. But the fact that people would walk into somebody else's space and disrespect it, that's obnoxious. Have you
Yeah.
had some of those kind of experiences?
Yes. Yeah, I have. I think less so in formal churches, but more so like being outside, where it's very clear you are, you've tried to find a quiet place in a park, or down a hiking trail, or so on and so forth, and or on a beach maybe. So you go to the beach, and you're there to get some quiet time, to listen to the water, read, think, do whatever. And there's a million other places where people could sit, but but whoever it is decides that they need to sit, very close to you, and then they get out their boom box, and proceed to have their day at the beach. And so yes, I've definitely had those times where I've been like, well, okay, I guess that wasn't going to last as long as as I hoped it would.
Yeah, we just take the moment to be grateful for what you had, I guess.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is pretty amazing is how you can find quiet, not necessarily silence, but you can find quiet in even really noisy places, that that you can be sitting on be sitting on a busy street, or in a subway car, or a number of other places where there could be an airport, places where it is naturally noisy, and you can still be quiet in those places, and you can still experience the feeling of quiet and peace.
Yeah, especially when there's kind of a rhythm to all things, and people are very disruptive most of the time, but even on someplace like you mentioned, a subway car, there's kind of a rhythm that is you can connect with the rhythm of things just going on, and that can be a very meditative place to be, or space to be in. So this kind of this conversation touches very much on one of the other attitudes, which is to be still. I'm curious if, so for those who haven't maybe heard a Coffee and Corona before, we're talking about the happiness hangouts that we do every Saturday right now. So the quote for Be Still is, life begins when we pause long enough to join it. And I really like that thought. It touches on what you're talking about, or do you think?
Yeah, I do, because if you are always moving, the your everything continues to change, and so you may be able to observe the movement around you, but you're not able to absorb and absorb what's here right now. And I'm an avid bird watcher, and one of the things that is, you absolutely have to be able to sit someplace and be quiet, because the birds, birds fly away, or you don't see them until you've sat there for a while, and they'll start to come out, they'll start to sing, they'll start to do whatever it is that they're gonna do, and they'll only do that if you're sitting there and you're being quiet.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we touched on during the happiness hangout, was when you're quiet, you start gaining awareness, and you can gain awareness of the thoughts in your head, gain awareness of the people around you, maybe what the thoughts in their heads, gaining awareness of your environment. So bird watching, that's definitely gaining awareness, because I went to went on a great hike the other couple weeks ago, and there wasn't a single bird I recognized.
Mm-hmm.
And just the first one that I saw was like, oh, wow. So I started paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was quiet. I wanted to be in nature and let it do its thing without being interrupted by my presence too much.
Uh-huh. What is your quote for being quiet?
It's one of my favorite quotes ever. "'Tis better to keep quiet and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt." Did you like that one, or
Yes, I love that one. I love that one.
have you ever found yourself in that position of
Yeah, oh yeah, yes,
keeping
all the
quiet? 'Cause
time. Yeah, right. Yes, because I mean, and I've also, well, I won't name any names, but I have a family member who I ended up getting in this big argument with this family member, and the he was able to, you know, he was able to go on and on and on about something, and it turns out this actually really isn't that related, but it is kind of interesting. We had this we had this argument, and he went on and on, spitting fact after fact after fact after fact. And because I felt like I didn't know enough about the topic, I had to I just was like, okay, I guess I'm going to lose this argument because I don't know enough to counter it. Then afterwards, and I was very angry about it, but he's like, why are you so angry? And I said, well, it was just really upsetting because you were just, like badgering me with facts and information. And he's like, I was just making that stuff up to win the argument.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah. So I didn't want to look stupid, so I was quiet.
I was going to say, I have faith in your ability to tie this into being quiet because then who looked like the fool? He looked like the fool for saying all that crap. And then once he admitted that he was making it up. I mean, what? That looks really foolish.
You got to give him credit for like being able to think on the spot, though.
Yeah. Well, I think most of the problems in the world are from people saying dumb crap. Mm-hmm. And I actually am a pretty good BSer, but I just find myself not bothering because I don't like going into that realm of I don't need to win an argument. It's not important. If there's something I don't know, I'd rather just be the student. So I shut up and listen because I'm very curious. I'm going to learn whatever I can. And sometimes I'll go learn about it afterwards, like whatever he was talking about. You could have fact checked your brother's BS.
I didn't say it was my brother.
Your family member.
My family member.
Who shall not be named. We all have those, and sometimes I think I am one of those, but I think there's a lot of wisdom in knowing when to shut your mouth. And I think a lot of our problems and the world's problems are from people not shutting their mouths when they should have.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we also had a good conversation yesterday about that sometimes being quiet is not good. That there are the times when it's important to be quiet, and then there are the times that it's important when you speak up. And I think that's the wisdom is what tells you, or your own, ethical and moral compass that tells you that when it's very important that your voice is heard.
Did you have any other takeaways from that conversation? Because it was a good topic.
Yeah, it was a good topic. Yeah, I think there were takeaways that are very relevant to what's going on right now. That that to be silent is to be what's the word that you're it's almost like it's like a silent approval. If you are not actually disagreeing and saying I'm not okay with this, it is in some ways a if you're not willing to speak up about it, then you must be okay with it.
Can we dive into that? Because that's actually how you started yesterday's conversation, and I really wanted to get into it, and we didn't. And so I would love if we can dive into why I put that talking point in there. Because for starters, being quiet reminds us to be careful about what we say, right? And I
Mhm.
think in what you're talking about is the climate today, especially when you get online, people are just fighting with each other, and it's mostly just everybody's trying to shame each other or slam each other with some opinion and then block each other because they're all so mad about it. And there's no communication happening with that at all. It's just everybody being pissed off at each other. No good is coming of it. We can see the world kind of crumbling, and it's because we're not able to communicate. And I think being quiet gives us a space to choose our words wisely. So hey, there's wisdom in not saying anything at all. But if rather than waiting for our chance to react and lambast someone else with our opinion, we can actually choose our words wisely and find a way to have some kind of real communication. And so the talking point that I'm getting at is sometimes being quiet is a powerful way to be heard.
Yes.
And that's what I'm getting at with that is what you started talking about right now is, well, everybody's talking at each other, but who's listening? How can we, what does it even matter what your opinion is if there's no one listening to it? And so
Uh-huh.
if you actually took the time to stop and listen to somebody's opinion, well, what would you hear? You hear that they've got an opinion. Yeah, they're mad. Well, what are they mad at? We can start, if we're quiet, then we can start tuning into, well, they're frustrated about something. They're frustrated that whatever we're yelling at each other about isn't working. Well, they're mad about it not working. I'm mad about it not working. Well, how can we actually communicate about it? Because like I used to take my dog. I know I'm running on. I want to
You're not running on.
really
Why do
soon.
I look glazed over? Yeah.
I wondered if you were drowning in the ocean. And
No,
let
you're
it
fine.
just
No, I'm engaged.
there's dolphins to save you.
That's right. They're too busy singing Puccini.
So if so, I take my dog before COVID and all that. I took my dog for these walks at a park, and I would have conversations nearly every single day. It shocked me how many great conversations I had with people with very different points of view from me. And just the fact that I was listening to them caught them off guard enough that they were willing to calm down and have a conversation with me because they had a chance to talk and they were like, oh, somebody's actually listening. I don't have to talk over them. I don't have to like
Mhm.
fight for the space of conversing. For starters, that catches people off guard. And then for second, I could hear is like, you know what, we're actually frustrated about the same issue. And that's where we should start is understanding that we're actually on the same side. We may have different perspectives on it. We may have different ideas of how to solve it or resolve the issue. But if we understand that we're not on opposing sides, that we're actually in it together, and that was the power of just being quiet and listening to
Mhm.
someone, was that awareness that I could tell them is like, you know what, I feel like you do. And they were like, yeah, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes, and you can only get that by being quiet and listening.
and I'm gonna
But
be
it
quiet.
does. What's that?
I'm gonna be quiet and listen to your thoughts on
Yeah.
that.
The what if it's a one-way street though? That's what it. We also talked about that. That it's one thing to be a good listener and to to initiate. you initiate a conversation, and you want to get to know a person. You want to find out, how they're feeling, what are they thinking, etc. But then, at what point do you have to stop being quiet? Where you're like, oh my God, they haven't asked me a single thing. Is that being, I don't know, narcissistic, that you want somebody to be engaged in a back and forth?
Well, in general, I'd say no. Sometimes it depends, it very often depends on the circumstances, obviously. Because if somebody calls you to say, hey, I really need something happen, I really need to talk to you, obviously it's going to be okay for them to go on and on, right? Because that's what they needed, and that's what we were there for them for. If it's not that kind of a situation, I think it's narcissistic for the person to keep monopolizing your time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've met tons of those people, and I'll stay for as long as I find it interesting, because if it's worth it to me, because they're saying something that I can learn something or be curious
Mm-hmm.
about, I'll spend my time being curious and listening. But when that isn't worth it to me anymore, oops, my time is my time, and you don't get it anymore
Yeah.
because you're abusing it.
So how do you get out? So how do you get out of a situation like that? Let's say it's somebody that you don't want to hurt their feelings, or you can't afford to hurt their feelings.
I actually stopped worrying about that quite a while ago. I used to be very, very worried about that, but I got to the point where I thought, well, if they don't really value my time or my opinion or want to have an actual conversation, they don't respect me, and I don't need to hang out with somebody who doesn't respect me, and I don't need to walk on eggshells around them and worry about hurting their feelings. I'm not going to be mean, obviously.
What if they're just oblivious? What if it's, somebody who just starts talking and loses track of time and tells really super long, boring stories, and and then you're like, oh my God, how do I get out of this?
Oh my God, Caroline, was that me? Did I just do that?
I need to know, PJ, how to get out of this.
Yeah, I'm trying to find out how to tell you to stop. Just shut up.
This is what you do. Okay, shut up.
I usually do this. Sorry, I'm dead. No more can listen. I usually just tell people I have to move on to my next thing. It's like, hey, I have to go. And sometimes that's the wake-up call they need. That may not be the most tactful. I mean, do you have a certain way of ending those kind of?
No, I will. I'll sit there and I'll try to, I'll try to figure out how can I extract myself. Usually it's kind of hard when it's, when it's not face to face necessarily. I don't know. I'm not sure which is more difficult. When you're on the phone, let's say when you're on the phone, you can kind of go into mode.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can do that for a long time and not really be listening, but you are still wasting your time. When it's in person, let's say you're at some kind of a get together, and somebody's sort of cornered you and monopolizing your time, you make an excuse and, oh, I got to go talk to them. I've gotten better about that. I've gotten better about being like, you know what, I'm going to go talk to these people over here.
So you manage your time?
I think so, for the most part. I think as I have gotten older, I have gotten more introverted. I think I'm less social than I used to be. That I am valuing quiet time more. And I'm not sure why that is exactly. Maybe it's because I have fewer friends, but but yes, it has allowed me having fewer. I love all my friends, by the way. I love you all. We just don't all live in the same place anymore. Um, the having um, yeah, having more quiet time is something I used to not like. I used to have to fill it with people or activities or like if I couldn't be home for a long period of time by myself. I wanted to be someplace else with people, going around, not being quiet. And I've become, in the last 20 years, much more like seeking quiet.
Well, 20 years is a long time for that shift to take place. Would you say that back at the time that you felt uncomfortable being alone or alone for too long?
Yeah, yeah, I was. I was uncomfortable. I felt like I needed that. I got my energy from being around people. I don't. Yeah, now I feel they. I find I don't find it as energy giving as I used to. I find I get more energy from having time to recharge by myself, time to sit and think or do something quietly.
So you're kind of like an extrovert cum introvert, or you
Yeah,
can, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I've always been an introvert. My switch was that I started understanding the difference between being introverted and extroverted because I was
Uh-huh.
always taught that, it's and extroverts are they're good people, they're the better people, they're courageous and outgoing, and that's how everybody should be because that's what you should want to be like. And introverts are shy, they're scared, they're low self-esteem, they're depressed. And so being an extrovert was like always the good thing, introvert was always the bad thing. But once I realized that, because I was painfully shy, but as I became overcame my shyness, I realized I really do love being around people. It's just not how I charge my batteries.
Uh-huh.
Like you kept on saying, you charge your batteries around other people, and that's kind of changed. And
Mm-hmm.
mine is that I've always charged my batteries with my alone time, but I get too much alone time. It's not good. I need to be around other people and socializing because that is a healthier, balanced way to live. Um, but as far as the being quiet, I think a lot of extroverts have shown their hand that they're actually insecure. They're not confident. They're the opposite of it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so they can't be quiet because they think it's awkward and uncomfortable. And I'm like,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I will sit next to the plant very quietly and happily. If you had to do the same thing, you would shift in your seat because you're so insecure about it. It's like
What are people thinking of me? Um, no, no. I remember. So I remember I was in, when I was in like high school, I was very outgoing, very extroverted, and I had this perception that the the really attractive girls at school, like the cute ones that everybody wanted to date, um, were the more quiet girls. And and so every morning, not every morning, but a lot of mornings, I would get up, I'd look at myself in the mirror, and I would say, okay, today you're going to be quiet, Caroline. That's who you are now, is quiet, Caroline. And I'd get to school, and by by the first, after like the 10 minutes of first period, when everything got going or whatever, I would have completely forgotten all about quiet Caroline. And until the next morning, I'd be like, okay, today you're gonna be quiet Carol, quiet. You're not gonna be the outgoing person, the one making the jokes, the one always asking the questions, whatever. And then I just eventually had to realize that's who I am, and that's one of my superpowers, is that um, that I don't have to be, I love being quiet when it is, when it is reverential and important and time to take things in. But it's also, it is okay for me to be who I am, which is kind of a happy, um, laughing, talking person.
Yeah, you are, so in my experience, gregarious and engaging.
Well, thank you. I it's weird that I struggled with that.
I find your story fascinating because it's the opposite of what I've always heard people talk about. Is usually they're the quiet man, like, you got the Stuart Smalley of, I'm going to be more outgoing. I'm going to say hi to 3 people and give 3 other people compliments so that I can get out of my shell. And yours is the opposite. You're like, I'm going to reel
I gotta
it
get into shell.
in. So I find it fascinating that you had the thought to take it the other way.
Well, it's kind of the, I mean, you grew up Mormon in a Mormon town. Is that correct?
In a strong Mormon community, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I grew up non-Mormon in a strong Mormon community. And so I think at a certain point in my life, I was looking for ways to not stand out because I already stood out. I already felt like I wasn't accepted because I wasn't Mormon. And so if I could somehow be more like the girls who I saw being accepted, um, that maybe that would give me some, that would help me feel more accepted.
Yeah, it's hard to feel like the odd one out, to feel singled out. And so there's, especially during those times of life, there's a strong drive to blend in, because if you're singled out, it's like you're vulnerable to the pack. And kids can be ruthless and cruel, and
Yeah,
nobody wants to be at the butt end of that cruelty. And I kind of wonder if something about being quiet is also seen as some vulnerability. It, again, that's another thing that fascinates me about the story that you just shared, is like, well, I think a lot of times people find the quiet as vulnerability. Again, that intimacy that you had talked about. And we have a tough time with that vulnerability, with uh, yeah. So I think if you find people where you can have that, it's kind of a magical thing.
I agree. I know. I was just thinking about, there have been a few times in my life when I've been, with somebody, either like a close friend or a partner, and just where you find yourselves someplace, and there may, something is kind of going, maybe it's, you're in a pretty location naturally, or there's just something that brings it together, and it's almost like a movie. You know how when a movie kind of all of a sudden zeroes in, and these people are just, like absolutely focused, like on each other, and it doesn't matter what's going around them in the world, except for everything just feels right. It's like a magic. I've had those moments in my life that, and you get those moments by being quiet.
I think that's a lovely place to end our conversation, because I think it is a lovely thought to encourage people to find those magical moments by practicing being quiet.
I
But
agree.
you think?
Yes, I'm going to be quiet now.
I think we're both going to be quiet
We're
now.
gonna be quiet. Yes.
Oh, what a loon I am.
This magic moment.
Well, I want to thank you for another wonderful hangout with Coffee and Corona. So this was sponsored by Hope Springs Studio. Go to hopespringsstudio.com, get some wonderful, colorful artwork, made by Caroline.
And by
The Happier Zone. If you go to thehappierzone.com, you can come hang out with us with the Happiness Hangouts. We're also putting out the Coffee and Corona and other podcasts and blog posts and books and all the good stuff to help you live a happier life, and not just the idea of it, but like a genuine, bona fide, happier life today. So the Happier Zone.
Awesome.
So,
well, thank you, PJ. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Likewise. We'll see
All
you
right.
again soon.
Okay, thank you.